this book about hope.
Yeah.
It interested me a lot when you brought it up. What was the main reason for starting to write this? Like, what got you into it?
So, I read a book called Fear. I think it was called Nerve, The Science of Fear. Eva Holloway, if I recall correctly. That was around 2020. And it was so interesting because I was seeing so many people react so fearfully during that time. Like it obviously, there was a reality. It was, but people, in my mind, overreacted in some cases to, how they coped with what was going on and this change. And I realized that so many people live their life driven by fear, and taking everything new. And I read this book, and this is this journalist's experiences and how she dealt with her own fears, just the way she structured it. And I thought, like, hey, I could write a book like this, but and I thought, like, almost how not to be fearful. But then it transitioned as my thinking went on, and I just realized that I think I carry hope, and I always have, and been through different things, and not everyone is in that same space, and yet. When and everyone goes through difficult periods. When I've gone through difficult periods, like, how did I get through it and what did I learn? And so I started to think about those things and how can I encourage other people who've been through. So yeah, it's not a book aimed at someone who's full on in trauma, like crisis mode. I think if that's where you're at, you need counseling, you need some immediate support, people around you. It's more people that are like ambitious and maybe positive and have dreams and hopes for their lives, but you hit life, really. Like, whether it's like, I remember when my dad died, that was something obviously that someone close, and then within a short space of time, my husband's business had already gone under. We were hanging on to our house. Then my dad died. So it was just like these things, and ended up moving with my mom. And, it's like life kind of hits you sometimes. And then you need that encouragement and that support to see that there is a future, and it can be a fantastic future, and you don't have to give up on your dreams. So that's where it all started.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I know I think the default for people is to be pessimistic.
Yeah.
I always have this joke that natural selection breeded for pessimism. Because if you were an optimist back in caveman times, you would say things like, yeah, there should be enough food to get us through the winter, and then you starve to death. So the natural inclination is to be a bit pessimistic, and also people are just bombarded with negative news all the time, and it really makes it seem like everything, like the sky is falling and everything's horrible. And there's a lot of people who aren't necessarily going through difficult times, but their default state is to be quite pessimistic about the world.
Yeah.
And I think hope is a very underappreciated thing. I try to encourage people to be more hopeful, but it's a bit of an upward battle. Yeah. Do you think people like this could also benefit from this mindset you're kind of applying in the book, and maybe they're not going through a tough time, but they need something to just spark the idea of things could go well?
Definitely. So as I was researching this, I also read this book called Hope Rising, and it's the science of hope. Mm. And so the definition, in English we use the term, like you might say to me after this podcast, like, I hope you get home safely. That's wishful thinking. Like, you've got no control over whether I get home safely, or someone says, I hope I win the lotto. Like, yes, if they enter, they've got a higher chance than if they didn't enter, but they've got no control. But the scientific definition is believing that your future is better your future can be better than it is now, and that you've got a role to play. So, there's like goals that you need to set, and then understanding that there are pathways to get to those goals, and then having the willpower. So like the motivation, you need all three components, because, if you know how to make $1 million, but you have zero motivation to do it, you're not going to make it. If you have the motivation, but you don't have the pathway, you're not going to be able to get there. So it's just the interesting combination of these things that gives people hope from a psychological point of view.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
I think of there's a brilliant quote that said, the bad news is that it's all up to you. The good news is that it's all up to you.
Yeah.
So if someone really isn't in a space where they feel like their life's a little bit hopeless, let's say, they didn't do too great academically at school, they got a decent degree at university, they're stuck at a dead-end job that they don't really like. Yeah. They don't really have much hobbies that bring them a lot of meaning or happiness, and they're hopeful for that future life that you speak about, where they can imagine waking up someday and just being content for the day. What's the beginnings of allowing yourself to feel that hope? How can you start to build out that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is imagination. You have to be able to see yourself in a better space. You have to believe that it's possible for you. And I think the way that comes about is often by other people's stories, seeing someone else that's done something that's difficult, that's overcome, particularly if they've overcome things that are more difficult in the situation. And there's always someone who's overcome something more than you have to face, I'm thinking of Hari Buddha Magar. So he's one of the guys that I feature in the book. He was born in Nepal, and I think he was married at like 14 or 11, something crazy, like that's the village life. He learned to write on a chalkboard. His dad was hoping one of the kids would end up in the military, and he enrolled in the Gurkhas. So it's a British force that they've got in Nepal, it's like special forces. And like they had to run like 4Ks up a steep hill with 25Ks of sand on their back. One of the things they have to do to get into. So he gets into this military program, and he's deployed all over the world, medic and sniper and all sorts of things. And then in 2010, he was in Afghanistan, and he stepped on an IUD and his legs were blown off. So
IUD or IED?
IED, sorry.
Yeah.
Have to edit that out.
Yeah, I think stepping on an IUD is quite harmless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so he stepped on an IED, legs were blown off above the knees, and I mean, you can imagine like his life changed in an instant, and he became depressed, and he tried to commit suicide a few times. So his life was, it was hectic. And he turned to alcohol, and I think it was like after a rant, and one of his friends said, look, I think you need help, and like you must be suffering from PTSD. And Battle Back is this charity in the UK that helps veterans, and they have all sorts of programs. And he went skydiving with them, and he thought to himself, well, I've got nothing to lose if I die, whatever. But he actually survived and enjoyed it, and he was like, okay, well, what else is possible? And so they did kayaking and mountain climbing and stuff. And then he started hiking with prosthetics, and then he decided he wanted to climb Mount Everest. And so he set his goal on that. He was training. He climbed, I think it's Mount Meru in Nepal, so he did that peak, and it was a record. And then in 2017, I think, I might have the date wrong, the Nepalese government banned any amputees or blind people from scaling Everest because of obviously their deaths on there. But another mountaineer said, well, half the people who go up there, able-bodied and full-sighted, shouldn't be on the mountain because they don't have the climbing capability. So it really doesn't make sense. And so he went to the UN in Geneva, to stand up for people with disabilities, and eventually the Nepalese court overturned that finding.
So he fought for the risk to go climb Mount Everest. That's
without
beautiful.
legs. Yeah, and he got that. So it's like obstacle after obstacle. Like never mind that the fact that you don't have legs. Then he had to raise money for the attempt and get special prosthesis. And he summited in 2023. So it was amazing. And then since then, he has done the highest peak on each continent. And in January this year, he did Mount Vinson in Antarctica. And his whole life, has changed. And he said, like, he doesn't want his legs back, because now his mission and his goal is to show disabled people that you can do things, like amazing things. And so
you can have hope. Yeah,
exactly.
I was thinking there's two things that came to mind immediately as you were talking about the story. The first is, a lot of people will hear something like that and be motivated and think, wow, if he can do it, then I can do it. But I think there's a small cohort of people that might think to themselves, that's a bad reflection on me. I feel even worse about myself now. Like, look, this person has much worse circumstances than me. It's starting from a much further back position, and they accomplished something, but I haven't. How do they kind of break the idea, instead of seeing it as a negative indictment on themselves, view it as a positive indictment a positive sign of what they can do?
I think it's a lot of it is mindset, and sometimes it's small changes that you've got to look at. Your belief systems and what are you believing? Is that true about yourself? It doesn't matter what it is. You can say, I'm too old to do X, but is that really true? Or I'm too, whatever. There's all sorts of excuses people come up with in their minds, and they flip things in the negative. So, it really is looking at your thoughts and asking yourself, is that really true?
Yeah. I often think of, I don't know if it's in psychology or in some brand of self-help, but I think the observation is half the battle.
Yeah.
being able to just catch yourself in those moments and think, I'm saying these things, but are they really true? Have I created this as a construct in my mind, or is this? I often say we have this confusion that because we can think about things that are facts, everything we think is a fact.
Yes.
So you think to yourself, the sky is blue, and that's a fact. That means anything else I think must be a fact. Most of the time, it's not. And I think people have this idea that if I have too much hope, I'll be delusional, which is something I've been thinking about recently. Most people under that mindset are already under delusion, just an opposite sense of it. If you tell someone they have to be more confident to get a date or something along those lines, and they say, no, but guys that think every girl wants them is delusional. Yeah, but in you thinking no girl wants me, you're also delusional. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. So if you're going to be delusional about one of the sides, want to pick the side that benefits you.
Exactly.
The other question I had on that was, do you think it's beneficial for people to just set an arbitrary goal to kind of get them started? Because I think of, climbing Mount Everest, there's no actual reason to do it except for the fact that it's cool. I think the first man to ever climb Mount Everest, when asked about why he wants to climb it, his answer was because it's right there. So do you think there's a benefit in, choosing something that you want to accomplish? It doesn't have to have rhyme or reason, but just to get you motivated in a direction and start working towards something, just so you can see like, oh, I am capable of things.
Definitely. I think, because, what is an arbitrary goal at the end of the day? Like, everyone is so uniquely created and has got unique passions and interests, and, something that someone else wants to do, you might think like, oh, I would never want to do that. But to them, it's like the most amazing thing, and why not? And vice versa. So I don't think, as long as it's a positive thing, it's not some negative, like I want to whatever be the drunkest person for the longest period of time, something that's going to be detrimental to your body, or something. As long as it's a positive goal, I don't think what it is that it's wrong to set a so-called arbitrary goal. But I think, yes, Mount Everest is like this massive, big goal. And I think people often do dream too small, and you should be dreaming big. But there's also something to be said for taking baby steps. Like you don't run a marathon if you've never run, you start by going around the block and then increasing the distance and building it up. It's a slow thing. It's the same, like if you want to get healthy, like one of the easiest things to do if you're not drinking water is just to like drink a glass of water when you wake up. Like that's your routine. Like now, before brushing your teeth, I have to drink 1 glass of water, and that's just a new habit that it builds and that you can add on to. So, yeah.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that clip from the interview of Argu. If you want to come onto the podcast, remember, all are welcome. Just fill in the form in the description and we'll see if we can have you on. If you want to watch the full podcast, click on the link here. If you want to watch anything else from the channel, click on the link here. Thanks for watching, guys.